The mansion on the hill looked like something out of a dream, or perhaps a lonely nightmare. Its glass walls reflected the golden sunset, stretching across endless acres of trimmed gardens, marble fountains, and silent statues that never smiled. It was the home of Richard Anderson, a man the world called the miracle maker, billionaire, inventor, philanthropist, the kind of man who seemed to have everything money could buy. Everything. Except happiness. Inside that enormous mansion, time felt frozen. The hallways echoed not with laughter but with silence, the kind that feels heavy like sadness too deep to be seen. Every corner was spotless, every chandelier sparkling. Yet something about the place felt empty, lifeless. In one of the upper rooms, behind a half-open door, sat a little boy named Ethan Anderson. He was just 10 years old. The walls of his room were painted soft blue, with stars on the ceiling that glowed in the dark. Shelves filled with toys surrounded him. Cars, robots, puzzles, even a small basketball hoop. But none of them were ever touched. They sat there collecting dust, just like the lonely heart of the boy who owned them. Ethan was different. He had never taken a single step in his life. Born paralyzed from the waist down, he spent his days in a custom-built wheelchair. Sleek, expensive and silent as it moved across the floor, doctors had told Richard, "Your son will never walk. His spinal nerves are permanently damaged." Those words shattered the billionaire's soul. He had built skyscrapers, satellites, entire cities of technology. But he couldn't build his son a healthy body. Every morning, Ethan would wake up to the sound of birds outside his window. He would roll closer to the glass and watch other children running through the gardens, children of the staff, playing tag, shouting, laughing. Their joy was something he longed for but could never reach. He would rest his head against the window pane and whisper, "I just want to run once." Just once. His father, Richard, rarely had time to visit. Not because he didn't love Ethan, but because every day he was chasing hope. He had spent millions traveling the world, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, meeting the best doctors. Scientists and specialists. Maybe someone out there has a cure, he'd say, gripping the edge of Ethan's hospital bed. But each trip ended the same way, went with disappointment and silence. The media called him the billionaire who couldn't heal his own son. And maybe that was true. Because while he could buy everything in the world, he couldn't buy the one thing his heart begged for, a miracle. Richard's wife, Eleanor, had passed away when Ethan was just a baby. She had complications during childbirth, leaving behind only a photograph and the faint scent of roses in Ethan's room. Every night before bed, Ethan would look at her picture and whisper, "Mom, can you see me? I'll walk someday. I promise." Then he'd close his eyes, imagining what it would feel like to stand, to take that first shaky step. But when he opened his eyes, he'd still be in the chair, motionless. The mansion staff treated him with respect, but from a distance. They called him Young Master Ethan, bowing politely before hurrying off. No one stayed to talk. No one asked how he felt. It was as though his disability built invisible walls between him and the world outside. But inside, Ethan's heart was alive, curious, kind, full of dreams he didn't dare share aloud. He loved stories. His favorite books were about heroes, kids who started small and weak but discovered hidden strength inside them. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and picture himself as one of those heroes, not a billionaire's son, not a boy in a wheelchair, but a warrior who would someday rise. Every evening the sun would fade, painting the mansion in golden light. The nurses would bring his dinner. The machines beside him would hum softly, and the loneliness would return like a shadow. In the distance, Ethan could hear the faint sound of laughter, not from his house, but from the gardener's children playing near the fountain. He'd listen carefully, his blue eyes glimmering with both envy and hope. He would whisper, "I wish I had a friend." That wish, simple and pure, drifted through the quiet mansion. He didn't know that somewhere outside, a little girl with a radiant smile and worn shoes would soon walk through those gates and change everything. Because sometimes, the biggest miracles in life don't arrive wrapped in gold or science. They arrive as ordinary people with extraordinary hearts. And for Ethan Anderson, that miracle was just about to knock on his door. The far edge of the Anderson estate, past the marble fountains and manicured lawns, stood a small building that hardly anyone noticed, the servants' quarters. It was simple, with peeling paint, creaky steps, and a single flickering bulb that buzzed at night. But for Grace and her 9-year-old daughter Maya, it was home. Grace had been a cleaner at the Anderson mansion for 5 years. Every morning she would rise before dawn, whisper a prayer and head toward the grand glass palace, with a broom in one hand and hope in the other. Maya, bright and curious, always begged to go with her. "Please, Mama," she would say, her wide brown eyes full of excitement. "I'll be quiet. I just want to see the big house." Grace would sigh, brushing her daughter's hair gently. "It's not a place for little girls, Maya. That house is for people with everything. We just clean their mess." But one particular morning things changed. The regular gardener had fallen ill, and the head maid, Mrs. Clara, needed an extra pair of small hands to help arrange flowers in the upstairs rooms. Grace hesitated, but eventually agreed. "You behave," she warned, "and don't touch anything." Maya's heart fluttered with excitement as she stepped inside the mansion for the first time. Her bare feet almost slipped on the marble floor. "The ceilings were so high," she whispered. "It's like a sky inside a house." The walls were lined with portraits, faces of the Anderson family, all smiling perfectly, but without warmth. It felt beautiful and cold. As she followed her mother through the corridors, Maya noticed a door slightly open, with sunlight spilling through the crack. She peeked in, and what she saw made her stop. A boy about her age sat near the window in a wheelchair. His hair was golden like the sun, his eyes blue like the sky, but they looked empty. He was quietly watching other children play outside through the glass. Maya felt something in her chest, a tug, a strange sadness. When her mother turned back and whispered, "Come along," Maya asked softly, "Who is that boy?" Grace's expression darkened. "That's Master Ethan, the son of the house. Don't disturb him, Maya. He's different." But later that afternoon, while Grace was cleaning another room, Maya found herself wandering back toward Ethan's door. It was still slightly open. This time she knocked, and a small, shy tap. No response. She peeked inside again. Ethan was there, holding a toy airplane but not playing with it. His hands just rested on his lap. "Hi," Maya said softly, stepping in. Ethan turned, surprised. "Who are you?" "I'm Maya," she said, smiling. "I brought you flowers." She held out a small bunch of yellow daisies she had picked from the garden. Ethan blinked. "Flowers?" "Yeah," she said cheerfully, walking closer. "My mom says flowers can talk if you listen carefully." He frowned, curious. "Talk?" "Yes. Each one says something. Like this one," she pointed to a daisy, "means hope." Ethan looked at the flower and whispered, "Hope," as if it were a word he hadn't heard in years. Maya grinned. "You should keep it. Maybe it'll tell you something nice." For a long moment they just looked at each other, two children from completely different worlds, standing in the same ray of sunlight. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan laughed. Not loudly, but a soft, gentle laugh that even surprised him. It was the first genuine laugh in that room in years. From that day on, Maya started visiting him whenever her mother was busy cleaning. She'd sneak into his room with a new flower, a story, or a silly joke. She'd talk about the birds in the garden, about the way rain sounded on the roof, about dreams of flying airplanes. At first, Ethan was shy and awkward, but slowly he began opening up. He told her about the places his father had taken him, the clinics, the doctors, the endless tests. He told her how tired he was of hearing the same sentence. "You'll never walk." Maya would shake her head and say, "Never say never, Ethan. My mama says miracles like to surprise people." Sometimes she'd wheel his chair closer to the window so he could feel the breeze. Sometimes she'd draw little pictures for him, stick figures running across the paper. "See?" She'd giggle, holding it up. "That's you running. Maybe one day this drawing will come true." Ethan would smile, but deep down he thought, "She doesn't understand. I'm broken." But every time she came, her laughter chipped away at that thought. Even the nurses noticed. "He's been smiling more," one whispered. "That girl, she's like sunshine in this cold house." Richard Anderson, however, had no idea this friendship existed. To him, Maya was just another worker's child, invisible in his world of power and control. But soon, her presence would bring to light a secret so shocking, it would shatter everything he believed about his son's condition. Because Maya wasn't just a poor little girl bringing flowers. She was unknowingly walking toward the truth that would change all their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and what started as an innocent friendship soon became the brightest part of Ethan's life. Every afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Maya would quietly sneak into Ethan's room, her little footsteps echoing softly through the marble hallway. She brought with her stories, laughter, and a sense of warmth that no medicine had ever given him. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just existing, he was living. They played board games, painted together, and even created silly little inventions from the toy parts scattered around his room. Maya loved asking questions about everything. Why do rich people have so many rooms? Why do you eat soup with silver spoons? Why do people whisper when I walk by? Ethan would just laugh and shrug. I don't know. I think grown-ups like to make things complicated. But one rainy afternoon, something happened, something that would change everything. Maya was helping him rearrange his bookshelf. She reached up to place a heavy encyclopedia on the top shelf, standing on her toes. Suddenly, she slipped. The book fell, and so did she, right onto Ethan's lap. Ouch, she said, rubbing her elbow. Ethan laughed softly. Are you okay? I think so, she giggled, then looked down. His blanket had fallen to the floor. As she bent to pick it up, her eyes caught something. Faint marks on the back of his lower spine. Tiny straight scars. Ethan, she said carefully, what are those? He froze, his smile faded. What? Those marks, she pointed gently. They look like cuts or stitches. Ethan looked away, his voice trembling. I don't know. I've always had them. Dad says they're from when I was born. Maya tilted her head, curious. Born? But babies don't get scars like that, right? He didn't answer. His blue eyes turned glassy, his fingers gripping the armrest of his chair. Dad said I was born this way. I don't remember anything. Maya wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes told her not to. Still, that image of those scars stayed in her mind like a haunting whisper. Later that evening, Maya told her mother, Grace, what she had seen. Mama, she began quietly as they washed dishes in their small kitchen, Ethan has scars on his back. He said they were from when he was born, but they don't look like that. The moment she said it, Grace's hands froze in the soapy water. Her face went pale, her eyes wide. Maya, she said sharply, you must never speak about that again. Do you understand me? But why? Maybe someone hurt him. Grace grabbed her daughter's shoulders, trembling. No, you don't understand, child. There are things in this house that are not meant to be spoken about. Maya's voice cracked. Mama, he's my friend. He deserves to know. Grace shook her head, tears filling her eyes. Some truths are dangerous, Maya. Promise me you'll leave it alone. Maya nodded silently, but her heart was burning with questions. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Ethan's voice, kept seeing his sad smile, kept wondering about those scars. Why would someone lie about that? What if something bad really happened to him? She turned to the small window beside her bed and stared at the mansion lights glowing in the distance. It looked beautiful from afar, but the more she saw, the more she felt that behind those shining windows hid something dark. The next day, Maya couldn't help herself. When she went back to Ethan's room, she watched carefully as his nurse adjusted the medical equipment beside his bed. The nurse lifted the back of his shirt slightly to place a small heating pad, and there they were again. The scars. Maya frowned, whispering under her breath, That's not from birth. That looks like surgery. After the nurse left, Ethan noticed her expression. You're staring again, he said shyly. She smiled faintly, trying to sound casual. Sorry, I was just thinking, do you ever wonder why you can't walk? Ethan sighed. All the time. But Dad says asking won't help. He says I just have to accept it. Maya lowered her voice. I don't think that's true. I think there's more to it. Ethan's eyes widened. What do you mean? Before she could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Maya quickly stepped back as Richard Anderson appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the room like a storm. What are you doing here? He demanded, his tone sharp. Maya's heart pounded. I was just bringing him flowers, sir. Richard's cold blue eyes narrowed. You don't belong in here. Get back to your mother. Yes, sir, she whispered, clutching her basket and leaving the room quickly. But as she walked away, she turned for one last look. Ethan sat silently in his chair, staring at his father with a mix of fear and confusion. That moment told her everything she needed to know. There was something Richard Anderson wasn't saying. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Maya whispered to herself, Something's wrong here, and I'm going to find out what it is. She didn't know it yet, but her curiosity was about to uncover a truth so shocking it would change not only Ethan's life, but her own forever. The next few days passed with a strange tension in the air. Maya could feel it every time she entered the Anderson mansion, a heaviness that seemed to follow her through the marble corridors. The house, once merely silent, now felt watchful, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets. Ethan had been quieter too. Since the day his father caught them together, his laughter had faded again. He still smiled when Maya came by, but it was different now, smaller, guarded. Something deep inside him had begun to stir, questions he was too afraid to ask, and Maya, she couldn't stop thinking about those scars. The memory of her mother's trembling voice haunted her. There are things in this house that are not meant to be spoken about, but the more she tried to forget, the louder her curiosity screamed. Then one afternoon, fate opened a door, literally. It was a Thursday and the mansion was unusually busy. Richard Anderson was preparing for an important business meeting, so every staff member was ordered to clean every corner until it shone. Grace was assigned to dust the study, the one room in the house everyone feared to enter without permission. But that day, Grace wasn't feeling well. She sat down for a moment, coughing softly. Maya, who was carrying cleaning cloths, rushed over. "Mama, let me help," she offered. Grace hesitated. "No, Maya, this room is off limits." But Maya looked at her mother's tired face, then at the large oak door to the study. "I'll just dust the shelves," she promised. "He won't even notice," Grace sighed, defeated. "All right. But be quick." Maya stepped inside the study, and her breath caught. The room was unlike anything she'd seen before. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with thick books, scientific journals, and awards. A massive desk sat near the window, papers spread across it, and on one side, a locked cabinet blinked with a red light, security-coded. The air smelled of leather, ink, and something metallic. Maya moved carefully, dusting the books and straightening papers. But as she reached for a stack of folders on the edge of the desk, her elbow brushed against a glass of water. It tipped, spilling across the papers. "Oh no!" she gasped, quickly grabbing tissues to wipe it up. In her hurry, she noticed one folder had slipped from the pile and fallen open on the floor. The label printed across it in bold black letters stopped her cold. Project Genesis, Anderson Medical Research. Her heart began to pound. The word Anderson stood out like a warning. She picked up the folder slowly, her hands shaking. Inside were printed documents, photos, and reports full of technical words she didn't understand. But one sentence caught her eye. Subject 001, Ethan Anderson, age 3 months, status failed trial. Severe nerve damage, permanent lower paralysis. Maya's vision blurred for a moment. She blinked hard, reading again, trying to make sense of it. Ethan Anderson, failed trial, nerve damage. Her lips trembled as she flipped through the pages. There were photographs, medical scans, charts and signatures, and then she saw it, Richard Anderson's signature at the bottom of every page. Her hands went cold. She skimmed through. More papers. They spoke about an experimental enhancement formula, something meant to accelerate neurological growth and physical strength in infants. It was supposed to create a new kind of human, be stronger, faster, smarter. But one paragraph made her drop the file completely. Test subject suffered irreversible paralysis due to spinal nerve degeneration following dosage error. Project suspended indefinitely. Data sealed under confidentiality clause. Tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't breathe. Ethan hadn't been born paralyzed. His father had caused it. At that moment, the study door creaked open. "Maya?" Her mother's voice. Maya spun around, clutching the papers. Grace's eyes went wide when she saw what her daughter was holding. "No, no, child. Put that back right now." "Mama," Maya whispered. He did this to Ethan." His own father. Grace grabbed the file from her hands, stuffing the papers back in quickly. "You don't understand, Maya. This is dangerous. If he finds out you saw this, he'll what?" Maya cried. "Keep lying. Keep pretending? Ethan deserves to know the truth." Grace's voice broke. "This isn't our business. We are servants, Maya. We don't question the people who feed us." Maya's tears fell silently. "But Mama, we're not talking about food. We're talking about his life." Grace looked at her daughter, so small yet so full of courage, and for a moment she didn't see a child. She saw someone brave enough to speak what adults were too afraid to, but then heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Grace froze. "Quick, put it back," she hissed, slamming the folder onto the desk just as Richard Anderson's shadow appeared through the glass door. Maya and her mother stood still, pretending to be cleaning. Richard entered, adjusting his tie. He barely looked at them. "Be sure not to touch my files," he said coldly. "Yes, sir," Grace replied, her voice trembling. As soon as he left, Maya glanced at her mother. Grace whispered in a trembling voice, "Forget what you saw, please." But Maya couldn't forget. The truth burned inside her chest like fire. That night, as rain tapped against the servant's window, she sat awake, whispering, "He deserves to know. Ethan deserves the truth." She didn't yet realize that uncovering it would bring danger, not just to Ethan, but to both of them. Because in that grand mansion of lies and luxury, the truth was the most dangerous thing of all. The night after discovering the file, Maya couldn't sleep. The secret she carried was too heavy for her small heart. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, innocent, trusting, and the horrifying words from that folder echoed in her head. Subject 01. Failed trial. Permanent paralysis. She knew what it meant now. Ethan hadn't been born paralyzed, he had been made that way. And the man responsible, the one who was supposed to love him most, was his own father. Maya lay awake, listening to the rain pattering against the window, clutching her blanket. Her mother's warning replayed again and again. "You don't understand, Maya, this is dangerous." But danger or not, the truth had already taken root in her soul. Ethan had a right to know who he really was, and what had been done to him. The next morning, Maya's hands trembled as she carried a basket of fresh flowers through the hallway. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Today, she thought. He deserves to know today. She reached Ethan's room. The door was slightly open, sunlight spilling across the floor. He was by the window, as always, watching the gardener's children running through the sprinklers outside. His face was calm, almost peaceful, until he turned and saw her expression. "Maya, what's wrong?" he asked softly. She hesitated, her throat dry. "Ethan, can I talk to you about something?" "Important?" He smiled faintly. "Sure, you look like you just saw a ghost." Maya stepped closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know the truth about your legs." The smile faded instantly. "What?" Maya took a deep breath. "You weren't born paralyzed, Ethan. Your father, he did something to you when you were a baby." Ethan froze. His fingers tightened around the armrest of his wheelchair. "What are you saying?" "That's not true." "It is," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I saw the files, Ethan, in your father's office. There was a project in this called Project Genesis. You were part of it. He used some kind of medicine, an experiment, and it went wrong." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "No, my dad loves me. He wouldn't—" Tears filled Maya's eyes. "I wish it wasn't true, but I saw your name. I saw his signature. It's all there." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The room was completely silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Then slowly he whispered, "Get out." Maya's heart broke. "Ethan, get out!" he shouted, his voice trembling with rage and pain. "Why would you say that? Why would you lie to me?" "I'm not lying," she cried. "I swear it, Ethan. Please, you have to believe me." Before she could finish, the door burst open. Richard Anderson stood there. The air seemed to freeze. His tall figure filled the doorway, his face cold as ice, his voice sharp as a blade. "What's going on here?" Maya turned pale. "Sir, Ethan looked at his father, eyes wide and trembling. "Dad, she said you did something to me. That you experimented on me." Richard's eyes flicked from his son to the terrified little girl standing beside him. For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed his face. "Maya," he said slowly. "Where did you hear that?" She swallowed hard. "I saw it. In your office. Project Genesis. It had Ethan's name." The billionaire's jaw tightened. "You had no right to touch my files." "I had no right?" Maya's voice shook, but her courage grew. "He had no right to suffer like this. You took his legs, his childhood, his life." "Enough!" Richard's voice boomed through the room like thunder. He took a step forward, towering over her. "You don't know what you're talking about. That experiment was meant to save him." Ethan's voice cracked. "Save me from what?" Richard turned toward him, his eyes desperate. "You were sick, Ethan. The doctors said you wouldn't survive past infancy. So I was trying to find a cure, something that could heal you." "But it didn't heal me," Ethan whispered. "It broke me." Richard's face crumpled. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought I was helping you." Tears streamed down Ethan's cheeks. "Helping me? By turning me into your experiment?" Richard fell to his knees beside the wheelchair. His voice shook. "Ethan, please. I've lived every day of my life hating myself for what happened. I've spent years trying to fix it. I would trade every dollar I own just to see you walk again." Ethan looked down at his father, the man who had everything, now begging on the floor. "Then why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Richard's voice was a whisper. "Because I couldn't bear for you to hate me." Silence filled the room. Maya stood frozen, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ethan turned his head toward her and said softly, "You should go." She hesitated. "Ethan, I'm sorry." He nodded faintly. "You were right to tell me." "Thank you." Richard looked at Maya, guilt heavy in his eyes. "Leave us, child." Maya stepped back slowly, her heart aching for both of them. As she closed the door behind her, she could still hear Ethan's voice trembling through the wood. "Dad, I don't know if I can ever forgive you." And then Richard's broken reply. "I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Outside the door, Maya pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "I just hope this truth can heal him, not destroy him." She didn't know it yet, but this painful confrontation was the beginning of something far greater, a journey of forgiveness, redemption, and the miracle that no science could explain. Days passed after that confrontation, and silence became the loudest sound in the Anderson mansion. The house that once echoed with laughter and piano melodies now carried only the faint hum of regret. Richard stopped going to his office. He cancelled meetings, turned off his phone, and spent most of his time sitting outside Ethan's room, waiting for a door that never opened. Inside, Ethan was a storm of emotions. The truth had torn something inside him, anger, betrayal, sadness, all twisted together. How could the man he called father be the same one who stole his future? Every time he looked down at his useless legs, he felt like a stranger in his own body. But in the quiet hours of the night, he also remembered the times his father had stayed awake beside his hospital bed, the countless doctors he had hired, the sleepless nights spent searching for cures. Could someone who didn't care love that much? Ethan didn't know. All he knew was that the truth had changed everything. Maya hadn't been seen since that day. She had stopped coming to the mansion, afraid she had destroyed their family forever. Every morning she would walk by the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ethan at the window, but the curtains remained closed. Her mother had warned her, "Some truths hurt before they heal," and Maya prayed every single night that one day the truth would start to heal. Then one evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled across the marble floors, Richard knocked softly on his son's door. No answer. He turned the handle slowly and stepped inside. Ethan sat by the window, staring at the horizon. His wheelchair was parked still, and in his lap lay an old photo, the two of them smiling in happier times. Richard's voice trembled. "Ethan, may I come in?" Ethan didn't look at him. "You're already in." The father nodded quietly and walked closer. "I know you hate me, and I don't blame you, but I need to tell you something. Not to justify what I did, but because you deserve to hear it." Ethan kept his eyes on the fading sunlight. "I'm listening." Richard took a deep breath. "When you were born, the doctors said your body was failing. They said you wouldn't live past your first year. I couldn't accept that. I poured everything I had into finding a cure, and when no one else would help me, I tried myself. I used an untested serum. I thought I could save you." His voice broke. "Instead, I hurt you, and I've hated myself every day since." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Then why didn't you just tell me?" Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Because I couldn't bear to see disappointment in your eyes. I wanted you to see me as a father, not a monster." For a long moment, silence filled the room again, heavy but soft. Then Ethan turned his head, looking at his father for the first time in days. His voice was quiet but steady. "You're not a monster, Dad. Just a man who made a mistake. A big one. But still a man who loved me." Richard froze, tears welling. "Ethan." "I'm still angry," Ethan admitted. "But I don't want to spend my life hating you. I've been trapped in this chair long enough. I don't want to be trapped in bitterness too." And for the first time, Ethan reached out and placed his hand on his father's trembling one. Richard broke down completely. He sank to his knees beside the wheelchair, sobbing into Ethan's lap. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Ethan's voice cracked. "Maybe not. But sometimes forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it." Outside, the evening breeze swept through the window. The golden light bathed them both, father and son, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world paused. Later that night, something extraordinary happened. Ethan couldn't sleep, his mind still replaying every word they had exchanged. He stared down at his hands and then at his legs. For years they had felt nothing but emptiness, but tonight something was different. He felt warmth, a faint tingling running through his toes. At first he thought he was imagining it, but when he tried to move, his foot twitched just a little. Ethan gasped, tears filling his eyes. He pressed his palms to his legs, feeling the faint pulse of life returning. "Dad!" he shouted. Richard rushed into the room. "What's wrong?" Ethan's voice broke with emotion. "I can feel my legs." For a second, Richard didn't believe it, until he saw it. Ethan's toes moved. Just barely, but they moved. Richard fell to his knees, crying uncontrollably. "Oh my God, Ethan!" Ethan looked at his father, eyes shining through tears. "You see, Dad, maybe forgiveness really does heal." And in that quiet, sacred moment, where science ended and faith began, something miraculous had awakened. Not just in Ethan's body, but in both their hearts. Outside the mansion, under the silver moonlight, Maya stood by the gate, whispering a prayer she'd said 1,000 times before. "Please, let Ethan be okay." And somewhere inside, as if the wind carried her words, a boy who once thought he'd never walk again smiled through tears, because hope had just taken its first step. The next morning, the entire mansion buzzed with disbelief. For years, Ethan Anderson's legs had been lifeless, cold reminders of a past no one dared to discuss. But now those same legs had moved, just once, just slightly. But it was enough to make the impossible seem suddenly possible. Richard barely slept that night. He stayed by Ethan's bedside, afraid that if he closed his eyes, the miracle might fade away like a dream. Every few hours, Ethan would try again, focusing all his strength, and each time, his muscles responded a little more. First a twitch, then a shiver, then a slow, unmistakable movement. By dawn, Richard called the family doctor, his voice trembling. "You need to see this now." When Dr. Patel arrived, he could hardly believe what he saw. The same boy he had treated for 15 years, the one declared permanently paralyzed, was moving his toes. Dr. Patel knelt down beside Ethan, his face pale with awe. "Ethan, do that again." Ethan concentrated, biting his lip, and lifted his right foot a few inches off the ground. His breath came out in a shaky laugh. "Did you see that?" Richard covered his mouth with his hand, tears filling his eyes. "You did it, son." The doctor stood up slowly, shaking his head. This is beyond medical explanation. His nerves were completely damaged. "There's no scientific reason for this recovery," Richard whispered. "Then maybe it isn't science this time." The doctor placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Whatever this is, don't stop believing in it. Sometimes healing begins where logic ends." That afternoon, the news spread through the staff like wildfire. Everyone who worked in the mansion gathered quietly outside Ethan's room, maids, cooks, gardeners, their eyes filled with tears and wonder. For years, they had pitied the boy in the wheelchair. Now they watched as he lifted his leg again, stronger this time. One maid whispered, "It's a miracle." Another murmured, "The Lord heard him." But the person who wasn't there to see it, the one whose heart had prayed hardest for Ethan, was Maya. That evening, Maya stood outside the mansion gates again. She had come to apologize, not expecting forgiveness, not expecting to be let in, only hoping to say she was sorry. She clutched a small envelope in her hand, a letter she had written the night before. But before she could slip it under the gate, a familiar voice called out behind her. "Maya!" She turned, And there he was, Ethan. But this time he wasn't sitting in a wheelchair, he was standing, her eyes widened in disbelief. The world seemed to stop moving. Ethan's hands trembled as he steadied himself on the railing, but his feet were firmly on the ground. Ethan?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. He smiled through his own tears. "I told you once that miracles weren't real. I guess I was wrong." Maya ran to him, covering her mouth in shock. "You're walking." "Not perfectly yet," Ethan said softly, "but it's a start." She began to cry, tears of joy, relief, and awe. How is this even possible?" Ethan reached out and gently took her hand. "Maybe it started the day you told me the truth. Maybe forgiveness fixed something medicine couldn't." Maya shook her head. "I only told you because I cared," he smiled. "And that's exactly why it worked." When Richard stepped outside and saw them together, his heart nearly burst. He hadn't seen his son this happy since before the truth shattered their world. He walked toward them, eyes shining. "To Maya," he said softly, "I owe you more than an apology. You gave us back something we'd both lost, hope." Maya lowered her head. "I didn't do anything, sir." Richard's voice broke. "You reminded me that love can still heal what science cannot." The three of them stood there, a billionaire father, his once paralyzed son, and a poor girl who had changed their lives forever, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. And for the first time in years, laughter filled the Anderson mansion again. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's progress stunned the medical world. He began physical therapy, relearning how to balance, how to step, how to walk. Every step was shaky, but every step was also sacred. Reporters called it a medical phenomenon. Scientists wanted to study him, but when they asked how it happened, Ethan always gave the same answer. It wasn't science. It was forgiveness. He didn't care if they believed him. He knew what had changed inside him the moment he forgave. The weight lifted, the bitterness dissolved, and something powerful filled that empty space. One afternoon, Ethan visited the garden where Maya used to play. He saw her there again, watering the flowers. He walked, slowly but proudly, toward her. "Maya," he said, smiling, "I'm walking because of you." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "No, Ethan, you're walking because you found peace." He nodded, gazing up at the sky. "Maybe peace is the real miracle." And as the wind danced through the leaves, carrying the scent of fresh blossoms, it felt as if the world itself was smiling, witnessing the truth that no riches, no machines, and no experiments could ever create. The power of forgiveness, the strength of love, and the miracle that begins when hearts finally heal. Months passed, and the Anderson mansion, once a symbol of silence, guilt, and pain, became a home filled with laughter, light, and life again. Ethan's recovery had stunned the world. What doctors couldn't explain, faith and forgiveness somehow accomplished. The story spread like wildfire, from local headlines to international news. Everyone wanted to know how a billionaire's paralyzed son had begun to walk again. But Ethan didn't want fame, he wanted meaning. He knew his story wasn't just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever been broken, betrayed, or hopeless. And most of all, it belonged to the girl who had changed everything, Maya. On a warm spring afternoon, Ethan stood on a grand stage for the first time in his life, not sitting, not hiding, but standing tall, his cane steady in his hand. The auditorium was filled with hundreds of people, doctors, students, parents, journalists, all waiting to hear the miracle boy's story. Cameras flashed, but Ethan's eyes searched the crowd for one face. When he saw Maya sitting quietly in the last row, her hands folded tightly in her lap, he smiled. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Most of my life," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "I believed my father's money could fix anything. I believed science had all the answers. But when I lost my legs, I learned something else, something no medicine could teach." The audience leaned in, silent. "I learned that pain doesn't always break you. Sometimes it opens your eyes." He paused, looking down for a moment. "You see, for years I blamed God, fate, everyone. But when I learned the truth about my paralysis, when I found out what my father did, I realized that hate was a prison stronger than any wheelchair." Murmurs rippled through the room. Ethan smiled faintly and continued. "The day I forgave him, something inside me changed. It was like a light came back on. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. And that was the day I started to feel again. Gasps filled the hall as he gently lifted his cane, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "I don't have a scientific explanation," he said softly. "But maybe some miracles don't need one." The crowd erupted in applause, thunderous, emotional applause that filled the room like a wave. Cameras flashed, people stood, some cried. But Ethan's eyes never left Maya's. She sat there, tears glistening, watching the boy who had once needed her help, now changing the world with his words. After the speech, Ethan made his way down the stage step by step. The crowd parted for him as if witnessing something sacred. When he finally reached Maya, she stood frozen in place. He smiled and handed her the microphone. "Everyone," he said, turning toward the audience, "this is the girl who told me the truth, the one who gave me the courage to forgive. Without her, none of this would have happened." The audience turned toward Maya, applauding loudly. She blushed, shaking her head. "I didn't do anything," she murmured. Ethan looked at her kindly. "You did everything." After the event, they walked together through the garden outside the auditorium. The air was filled with blooming jasmine and the soft sound of wind chimes. Maya turned to him. "You didn't have to tell everyone about me." Ethan laughed softly. "I did. Because the world deserves to know that miracles don't always start with power or money. Sometimes they start with kindness." Maya smiled, looking at him with teary eyes. "So you've come so far, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." He stopped walking and reached into his coat pocket. "And I want to give you something." She looked confused as he pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" "Your scholarship letter," Ethan said with a grin. "Full sponsorship." "You're going to medical school," Maya gasped, covering her mouth. "What, Ethan, I can't—" "You can," he said firmly. "You always wanted to help people. You helped me when no one else did. Now it's my turn to help you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." He smiled warmly. "Say you'll chase your dreams. Say you'll keep believing that kindness can heal the world." Maya hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan hugged her back, his eyes glistening. "No, Maya, thank you. For saving me." Years later, Ethan Anderson's story would inspire millions. His speech went viral. His foundation, the Genesis of Hope, helped children with disabilities all over the world. And beside him always was Maya, the girl who had once been poor, now a brilliant doctor dedicated to healing others. Together they traveled to hospitals, villages, and orphanages, spreading the same message Ethan had learned through his pain, that no matter how broken life may seem, forgiveness can make miracles real. One evening, standing on a hospital rooftop after visiting sick children, Ethan gazed at the setting sun. Maya stood beside him, the orange glow reflecting in her eyes. He said softly, "You know, Maya, for a long time I thought I'd lost everything, but it turns out losing my legs helped me find my purpose." She smiled gently. "And what's that?" "To help others walk, not just with their legs, but with their hearts." They both looked out at the golden sky, silent but smiling, because they knew this wasn't just the end of a story, it was the beginning of a legacy, a story that started with pain and ended with a miracle.